welcome to the podcast. It is great to have you join us here again. It really is a beautiful day in the neighborhood.
Yes, and we are so excited about our show today. This is a subject that is actually really, really close to my heart, talking about teenagers and specifically parenting children who are artistic, not autistic, because we don't really have a lot of experience in that. And that is a great topic for another show, but artistic children who are artistic, musicians, artists, writers, poets, all of those children that are so gifted that I feel like are this precious treasure that we need to take care of. But this podcast is going out in the midst of Lent.
Right. And so we want to make sure everybody knows that you are invited to be a part of Cane 90, our program that is dedicated towards enriching your marriage and family life throughout Lent and Easter. It's got some great meditations for you, but also some very practical ways to incorporate your faith into your own family culture.
Yeah. And this is I feel like if you work for a parish or if there are priests listening to this is like easy because everything is free. You can get promotional stuff for free. You can sign up for free. They can get daily emails, weekly emails. There's activities for families to do on the weekends. And then even during the Easter season, we have you looking at your family culture and thinking, how can we make things better? And how can we grow more of a Catholic family culture in our home? It's really, I feel like it's like a no-brainer.
It's easy. Well, so sign up for the free emails or pass it along and to your parish.
Yes.
All right. So, and I feel like we're traveling a lot. We've got a lot of things going on. February is always.
Feel like we're traveling a lot. We are traveling a lot right now.
And it's nonstop adventure for us. But I don't think there's any adventure that is quite like raising teenagers.
Yes. That is
and we wanted to cover this topic, not just with our own experience, but bring in another veteran parents out here.
And the real reason is because we just wanted another reason to connect with Bill and Tanis. I mean, let's be honest here, right, guys? Right? We're just like, we came into each other's orbit through their ministry, Marriages of Grace. And we have just been so blessed by getting to know you guys. So welcome to the podcast, Bill and Tanis.
Thank you so much, Alicia and Mike. It's such a pleasure to be here with you today and to be able to talk.
Yes, it is great. So we up in Cleveland, Ohio area, they're doing some great stuff for marriages, and we were honored to be a part of it. But I know it's been going on for years now, and there's other little Marriages of Grace that are seedlings are being planted and growing in other places as well. But why don't you guys tell us a little bit about yourself, your family, and your life, Bill and Tanis?
Sure. Yeah. So Bill and I just celebrated 31 years of marriage last week. So we've been married for a while, 9 kids and 4 grandchildren. And I know we're kind of close to you guys. You guys have one more.
Just one more.
So wait a minute, you are also crazy people who got married in the middle of winter?
We did. January.
So did we.
Yeah,
so did we. I think
that.
it's a special couples who get married in January.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, but if you got married in Florida, that doesn't count.
No.
Philly, worst winter weather that they've had in like 60 years.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, we were negative 40 up in Canada. January 18th. It was crazy.
That's awesome.
Oh, goodness. Anyway, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No
interrupted
problem.
you.
No problem. So married that long. And then back in 2012, we decided to build this thing called Marriages of Grace. We had started out in pre-Cana ministry and quickly realized that once we had prepared these couples for marriage, that there wasn't anything left for them after that. It was just kind of like, okay, well, hope you have a great marriage, good luck. Yeah. So we wanted to give them more, and we founded something called Marriages of Grace, and the tagline is enriching and strengthening Catholic couples.
Awesome.
And so we've been doing that now since 2012, and it's going great. We have an annual marriage enrichment, which is what you spoke at last year, and then we have bi-monthly what we call Canaanites, which are just theology on tap for married couples. It's usually a bar, restaurant, some kind of relaxed, fun setting, and just a short speaker, and then they enjoy each other's company. Yeah. So that's been a really big hit, but it's a way of kind of connecting Catholic couples so they don't feel like they're living in isolation anymore. They're living it's so easy to feel, especially in our neighborhoods, that we're the only crazy people with 9 kids or whatever, or we're homeschooling. Wow. That's like, I don't know if there's anybody else in our neighborhood who does that. But once you connect these couples together, they realize, hey, they're not living in isolation. There are other couples that are like-minded. So it's been wonderful.
And we really saw that come to fruition. Just earlier this month, we tried a new initiative, just an unbelievable day. It was a dinner, dance, and it was preceded by a Eucharistic adoration with we had
almost 300 people. It was really
all
the
married couples.
Yeah.
So awesome. we had Eucharistic adoration, had a guided kind of praise and worship with a great priest who kind of tailored it straight for married couples. And, we had 30-45 minutes in front of our blessed Lord, and then straight into dinner and dancing. And it was unbelievable. It was just
dinner, dancing, praise and worship. Wow.
We can't really take credit for it, but we did have someone else who kind of was the inspiration behind it, but then we kind of backed it, and it really was a great day. So this is the kind of thing that can happen through our ministry. Yes. And so we're just blessed to be a part of it. We've got a great group of people that surround us and help us with it. So it's been great.
So can I just ask, so Marriages of Grace, it's kind of like, if somebody else is listening to this and is like, oh my gosh, this sounds amazing. It's a structure that other people can learn from. I think that's, you have talked about
the possibility
of passing the structure on to others.
Yeah. So actually we're now in Philadelphia as well. And I know you spoke at the Philadelphia Marriages of Grace as well. So it's now at the point where if another diocese or somewhere else wanted to adopt this, they could. And it's something they could take to other parts of the country. And it's really a simple concept, but it's not being done enough on a great enough scale. When it happens at the parish level and it's in a church setting, people are much less likely to attend something like that, or you're going to be preaching to the choir, right? This is an opportunity to kind of reach a lot more couples, but on a much more neutral ground, so to speak. Like, as you know, our conference is at a conference center, and these Canaanites are in a bar. So, you get Catholic couples that are coming together. Really, it's a pre-made date night for them is what it is, and they get to go and they get to have a great time, but it's Catholic content and it's with other Catholic couples. So yes, this structure is in place. And it can be adopted by other people now if they wanted to.
That's awesome.
And I hope that they do. I think that it's very much needed, and I think it is something that so many people, so many other places could benefit from.
Absolutely, and I'm just thankful that you stepped forward, that you said yes, that you took the risk, if you will, took the time, the energy, and you persevered through probably a lot of ups and downs over the years, particularly throwing a pandemic in the midst of that and everything else, right?
That's interesting.
But this is great because there are a lot of folks out there who are just longing for that. So thank you for making that happen. I know when we were there, we met a number of folks who were just like, this is just a lifeline for them in their marriage. So that is really, really so good.
So, so Bill, can you tell us a little bit about your family and just kind of like who you are, how you parent, a little bit about your kids?
Yeah. So, my career has been for the last 25 years, a mishmash of 2 professional lives. I've been a firefighter and paramedic full-time. And in some manner or other, I've been working also in hospital settings. I was an ICU nurse, then I was a nurse practitioner, still am a nurse practitioner in emergency medicine. And then I was just appointed the director of EMS for the Cleveland Clinic. And so that those roles have kind of taken me into places where my time is divided up in chunks. So I have a couple of days off, and then I'm gone for several days. And then I have a couple of days off, and then I'm gone for several days. There's meals that are missed. There are birthdays and events that I just cannot make. So that has really forced me to lean a lot on my lovely wife here. And then also just to always back her up behind the scenes, so that the kids know that yes, the buck does stop with Dad. He might not be here, but he's coming. And that's something that's important. They need to know that it's not just her on an island. We have 9 kids. Mixture of boys and girls, 5 boys, 4 girls, And, raising boys and girls, it's totally different. Okay. You cannot tell me that they are interchangeable parts.
Right.
And so the boys respond differently. They start to kind of bucket Tanis around 11 or 12 years old. It's really at that time where they need me to kind of step in and start, showing them what a man is. Mm-hmm. The girls have different needs, and we've learned from older couples, like we are now. When we were early on in our marriage, some tricks of the trade, and going forward, we hope to share some of our mistakes and some of our successes, because by no means are our kids perfect. They are a conglomeration of my wife and my personalities and faults and also our strengths. Yeah. So there's a lot of us in them, and as much as I want to try to fix what I see in them that's wrong, I realize that it has to start here with me, and so I can't give what I don't have. And that's really the principle that guides my parenting style, is that if I'm not on my knees in front of the Lord, if I'm not having an active prayer life, if I'm not in a state of grace, I'm not an effective father. Yeah. And that's really the key parenting jewel I can give to any young father out there, is get your soul right with God before you can give it to your son or your daughter.
That's so
can
good.
you just go back 1 second to something that you said that I'd just like to have you just expand a little bit more? You said that when the boys, and we'll talk about the girls too, but just to talk about the boys for a second. So when those boys are hitting adolescence, right? 11, 12, testosterone is just starting to coming in there, right? And you said they really need you to show them what it means to be a man. That is so true. Mm-hmm. And there are fathers out there with 10-year-olds, 11-year-olds be like, okay,
so what is that?
What do I do? what does that mean? Could you just give some principles or even just practical things that you did?
Sure. So a couple, sure, of course. So one of the things that I always do, and I'll give you the real world example of this. It occurred just a month and a half ago with my 11-year-old son. I contacted my parish priest, my pastor, and I said, hey, listen, Father Barry, can we use your private, chapel? I know you got one in your rectory. I'd like to have the talk with my son about what it means to be a man, what our sexual identity is, and how we live that out as a disciple of Christ. And so I took my son, my 11-year-old son, and we had an hour-long talk in a very private chapel, just me, him, and the Lord in front of us, about what it meant to be a man in terms of sexual relations, and how the total free, fruitful, faithful, and how that is employed in our sexuality. And that was really a pivotal experience. At the very end of it, my 11-year-old son's curled up in my arm, I'm giving him a huge hug. Father Barry walks in, he goes, oh, sorry, I see something special going on here. And that's really that kind of connection. I'm really grateful for that. I've done that with all of my sons. And the topic ranges also from, sex and sexuality, but also just to what's the supreme virtue? What's the supreme virtue? Now, this is a loaded question. It's obedience. When Adam and Eve broke everything, it was the sin of disobedience that did it. And from that sin, everything falls apart. I asked them, when you look at the 10 commandments, what's the first commandment? Obey the 10 commandments. And that's the implicit commandment, right?
Right.
And and so obedience is really one of those virtues that I have to stress at this time in their life, that, look, you got to trust me, son. Yeah. I have your best interest in mind. And there's going to be a lot of forces at play over the next several years that are going to be telling you many different things of what we're trying to teach you in the family. Yes. And if you don't understand, I just ask that you obey.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh gosh, that's awesome.
and that's really powerful because there's going to be, like you said that, but so many of the powerful forces at work in our kids, particularly our boys, the hormones, everything that's going on, let alone the culture at large, is saying the exact opposite.
Yeah.
You know, and here you are, because when you shared that first, I'm like, wow. That's really beautiful that you know, I've done the talk, I've done it in different scenarios and settings, but I'm like, bring them before our Lord, making this like, okay, this is what the beauty of how you were designed. And we're sitting before your creator. We're sitting here in the presence of our Lord so you can unpack this truth in a beautiful way. And it's based in a relationship, a trusting, loving relationship. And it's given kind of the sacredness and the dignity that conversation really demands. So I love that idea.
How about you, Tanis?
And you know, further to that is that, you know, I remember listening to a Janet Smith talk many years ago about, you know, just, you know, when you're trying to understand how a machine functions, where do you go? You go to the rule book if you got it, manual. But wouldn't it be better if you went to the maker of the machine? And, you know, here we are. What is the purpose of sexuality? What's the purpose of our lives? Well, let's go to the maker. And here he is 2 feet away from us. And that's kind of why I bring them in front of the Blessed Sacrament, because I center it all on that concept. Look, we have to go to our Creator to find out our purpose and how we best operate.
So, and I want to get to the girls in a second, but Tanis, I didn't know if you had any thoughts about the boys, because because I mean, I find with my teenage boys, the best way I can express it, sometimes I'm just like, I love them so much it hurts, you know? And I know that I can't gush over them the way I would a baby, even though like I want to so badly sometimes, you know? And it's just so much tension for mom when they're teen. I just thought if you could have some.
I think the hardest part is, like Bill said, you get to that, you know, early preteen age, and the recognition as a mom that they don't need me the way that they needed me when they were an infant or even a young child. They want so badly to be like dad. They want to be, they're in that transition period. They want to be a man, right? So they are actually pulling away. They pull away from you as a mom, and that hurts. It is very, very hard. I remember our oldest child is a daughter, and then our next one is a son. And when he started to do that pulling away, that was hard. And especially as a homeschooler, because I'm homeschooling, you know, I so much of, not so much anymore. I'm not homeschooling, but I did at the time. And I'm still homeschooling, but not as much. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. But I had everything was invested in my kids, right? I gave up a career to be home with my kids and raise them. And then particularly when you're homeschooling them, you've got their mental, their physical, their emotional well-being all wrapped up, and you have to be mom, and you have to be the disciplinarian. So when they start to pull away like that, you take it very personally. I took it very personally. Yes. And I felt like a failure. I remember saying to Bill, I feel like a failure as a mom. And you're not. It took me a while to recognize that, no, I'm not a failure. This is just a stage that not only is he going through, but I have to go through too. I have to trust that God loves my son more than I do. And he has his best interest in mind. So if I have to let go, and we actually sent a few kids off to a private school that year. I was overwhelmed when our oldest son was about 12. I could not do it anymore. So we sent them to a private school for 3 years, and that was where that feeling of failure came in. But to trust that it's okay, God loves my child more than I do. I have to be able to let go, and I have to let him be formed, and I'm not in control. I'm not in control of everything.
Doesn't Satan do that too? Satan takes our greatest gift that we give our children, like our time and everything, and then he kind of uses that against us and say, yeah, you gave all this, and now that's not, he uses that, you know, to attack us. And oh my gosh, we have to come against that with truth, you know, to know, you know, like no, they need, and this is one of the reasons we do the podcast. So we can tell moms,
right,
no, this is just something they go through. They have to go through this.
And I remember you talking about how you felt like it was the longest breakup, right? You know, and just the mother-son relationship and
raising a son is like the longest breakup you've ever had. You know?
Yeah.
I like that. It's so true. It's so true.
But there is a distinct role. I often say, and really I'm stealing it from John Eldridge, but
we steal everything.
Masculinity, it can only be conferred by masculinity. There is something about boys, particularly as they get the pre-adolescent time, that they need dads to step up. And I feel like for me, I think I was an engaged father, but it wasn't really until that time where I realized, okay, the ante just went up a big, and I had to step up my game. And that's when we kind of started creating rites of passage and all these other things for my oldest son. And then, but that is those moments where we recognize they're entering into, the white waters. They're entering into some rapids. And part of our job as a parent is to know what's coming around the next corner for them, and to plan and help them prepare and guide them and steer them in the right direction.
Yeah.
There's so much that comes with that.
And I feel like on a practical level, I don't know about you, Tanis, but there's so many times with my teenagers, when my sons, when I see them doing something and I think, I need Mike to address this. I could address it. And sometimes I will, but I just feel like they receive it so much better sometimes when it's from dad. I don't know if you.
Yeah. I mean, that's our experience. I mean, the number of times that I've said to Bill, you're going to have to be the one to say this. I can't say it because it's not going to go over well if it comes from me. And there's an authority, right? There's an authority that comes from dad that we don't have as moms. So yes, we have authority, but it's just so different. It's so different, right? We're
it's the, there's a tendency for boys, especially at that age, maybe some girls, just to think of mom as nagging. That this is just, they'll use that as mom. You just got to stop being a nag about this, and that's where the dad needs to step in and go, wait a second, nope, you just crossed the line. This is not nagging. There's something important underneath all of this, and the way we explain it and the tone of voice that we use. And the calmness, I think, is incredibly important.
Well, I think we're so much more emotionally involved, Alicia, that Bill has to tell me, okay, let's take this down a notch, because I am so emotionally involved in my children, and you love them so much that it's hard not to bring your emotions into it. And that's where I think the father role is so great.
Mike, how many times have you walked in and you go, oh my gosh, so loud in here, can we just cut this out? Stop talking. And let's clear the space. I want to have some one-on-one time in a very quiet manner, and let's discuss this.
Yes,
which is a perfect intro to teenage girls. But
yes, I know, because at one point I had 4 teenage daughters.
Right.
Oh wow.
And there, not only did I at that time was carrying my shaving and other things. I had a little toiletry bag. I thought I was back in college because my daughters would take my razors, and now we have our own bathroom. Wow. It's separate and distinct, but the emotional conversations that happened, the drama that was involved was very different than our teenage son.
There was definitely times of me walking away and just saying, you need to do this.
Yeah.
I
am likely going to kill one of my children if you do not take over right now.
Yes. I was like, I feel like a teenager right now. This is not a good place to be as a mother. I should not be feeling like a teenager. But girls.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about girls. I mean, again, there are things that we have in common, which we'll talk about a little later, but particularly thinking about girls, what does that look like for you? How have you prepared yourself and your daughters through these adolescent times?
So I think that our perspective is actually a little different than most people. Our oldest child was actually quite gifted and very talented musically. And so we had a whole other host of things that we were dealing with her. I think our next 3 girls are much more the norm. And so we actually parented our oldest very differently than we parented our next 3 girls. So yeah, it's when I reflect on it, what I did with my oldest daughter is so different than how I've had to treat my other three. So I have to think about it carefully. Sure. But we did homeschool our oldest all the way through high school. The other girls actually went to school for high school. So again, it's been a little bit of it. I'm still homeschooling my last daughter. She's in 8th grade this year, so she will go to high school next year. But I had a very, very close relationship with my oldest daughter. I think, again, Alicia, maybe, I don't know what your experience is, but when it's your oldest, you just kind of have that unique perspective because it's your oldest. So you've kind of invested a lot in that first one. And you kind of have, I had 2.5 years before our next was born. So I had that really concerted time with her, which was, again, something that I never got to experience again as a parent, that one-on-one, having one child. So I, not as much emotion, like from like a social perspective with our oldest, because she was homeschooling maybe a little more introverted in that regard. But our next three, oh my goodness, the amount of drama and everything that I had to deal with, especially in high school, and all these friends. I mean, they would bring friends home and they say, "Mom, here's so-and-so." And I'd say, "I don't, remember her." Like later I'd say that. And she goes, "Oh, Mom, you've met her 5 times. I'm like, you bring home so many different girls that I have. I mean, and I'm pretty socially, aware. And I usually remember people's names pretty well, but the number of kids that were coming in and out of the house was just unbelievable. I'd never experienced that before with the boys weren't like that. So all of a sudden these girls with their social situations was a little overwhelming for me, honestly.
And there was also timing involved too, because our oldest was born in 1992, which was the advent before all of that social media. She was in high school.
That's true too. Yeah.
So true.
And that has dramatically changed a lot. We had her and then 3 boys. Yeah. Which was a perfect setup because then the girls came on, and that was right in the midst of Instagram and Snapchats and everything during high school and technology, and that is a Pandora's box. I mean, we can open that if you want, but that is still a nut that needs to be cracked. I think each child has their own individual challenges, and we've taken different approaches. We were somewhat blindsided by our second daughter, just because we had kind of gotten set up by our first. We had. A relatively easy time with our oldest daughter, Elena. Right. And then our lovely Gabrielle came on, many years later, and different personalities right in the midst of the technology generation. And
weren't quite sure how to handle the cell phones and the social media, and it really caught us off guard.
Let's talk about social media for a second.
Because that's a big deal. And I think it's actually, it's appropriate for both men and women, but I think
especially appropriate for girls.
Yeah, the teenage 100%. Girls, and I was just listening this morning that there are some new studies out that talk about the impact that it's having, particularly on teenage girls. Yes. So what's been your experience, or how have you approached that, or what are some of the concerns that you've seen?
Well, actually, I think a lot of people know the concerns. I'm actually a little more interested in knowing what you do. Yeah. Because I know that there's every parent out there who's listening to this who has a teenage daughter is concerned about social media.
Yeah. Okay, so just to start, we've been pretty, from our perspective anyway, much more restrictive than most parents. But even so, there was a time when I literally took a hammer to my daughter's whatever it was. I don't know what
that was. One of those moments when I walked in, Mike, and it was like,
because
we've all felt like doing that, though, Tanis. Yeah, I've never done it. I have thought about smashing it against the wall. It's good to know that there are parents who actually go through with that in some ways too.
Oh yeah, we did, and literally it was like an exorcism. We had to call the police about 20 minutes later. I kid you not. Okay, it was that dramatic. Wow. And she was in what? 8th grade, 9th grade?
It was young.
9th grade.
Ninth grade.
Whatever. We've really, at that point, we kind of learned that we made a mistake. Yes. We should not have given her that cell phone that early. And that was probably 8th grade.
Wow. Maybe, I think it was 9th with her. But regardless, the point is that here was something that we didn't know how to handle. And then when we realized how much it was infiltrating and how damaging it could be, we were like, we're done. This is not, something that we can play with anymore. I think it's much, much better now have, whatever this is, 10 years later or so, because there's so many more restrictions that are available for devices and social media. I can put restrictions on laptops, on cell phones. I can do this now. That wasn't available before, but I think it's a very dangerous place to allow kids to go without supervision, right? They need our guidance. They need our supervision. And without that, and I think in those early years, there wasn't the ability to be able to do that. So it was much more dangerous. I mean, it's dangerous now, but parents have to be aware that they need that oversight and they need that control. I mean that in a good way. I don't mean that in a bad way.
We use, just getting the nuts and bolts. Right now, we're using a phone called TrueMe.
Okay.
TROOMI. Yeah.
And that has lots of limitations. We've set it up just so that my daughter can take a call and text. Yeah. So it solves the problem of, hey, I need to get a hold of you because you're late for ballet practice. Let's get this taken care of. That's the right use of a cell phone, and it removes kind of that interaction between all the social media crap that comes through.
That's a huge and so do you allow, or in the ideal place, I don't know if you've progressed or changed in that with social media. So cell phone is pared down to limited text and calling, right? And we have the Gab phone that we use.
Yeah, we have a Gab phone for our 14-year-old daughter.
Oh, okay. It's the same kind of thing. Yeah.
She can do music, pictures, call and text. But
that's exactly, and really that's the right use of that. I mean, all this social media stuff, that's just that. The phone is just a conduit for social media. It's not really a phone at that point. The phone's design was to allow you to talk to people from distances away from, next door. Right. And, that's kind of how we use that phone. We look at it. What's the purpose of it? Let's use it for its right purpose. Right. And when you do that, it's okay. It's okay.
Right. Okay. So my question then, which I think a lot of parents are probably asking in their own minds, is, then how did your daughters stay connected socially? I mean, I know, like, for our daughter, our 14-year-old right now, she has 3 or 4 really good friends, which I've seen that pattern with all of my daughters, and it feels very appropriate and manageable and good developmentally. She gets together with them,
other people too, right?
Yeah. But I mean, her really close friends, right? And those are the girls who come over, and she's not on social media at all. But I know that, every family is a little bit different how they do that. How have your daughters stayed connected socially with friends? Have you seen that as a challenge?
It's definitely changed. I mean, now I'm speaking, we're jumping the gap between my oldest daughter, Elena, who didn't have any cell phone, to my next daughter, Gabrielle, who we smashed the cell phone.
But then she got another one.
And then now to the 4th iteration of this, which is our youngest daughter, Juliana, who's an 8th grader. And I think our approach has matured in the sense that, honey, if you want to use this, pick up the phone and call and have a conversation. Talk with a person. Engage in two-way conversation instead of, this fake kind of posting something, making a, facade of who you are and trying to impress people. Actually pick up the phone and have a conversation. Because believe me, back in 1980, I would have died to have had a phone that I could talk to my friend that wasn't stuck in the middle of the kitchen, strung to a cord. Right. So you got to look at the benefits here. You got a lot of benefits that I didn't have, and neither did your mom.
But they do. Okay. To be fair, our 8th grader does go on social media. Sometimes she'll
on her laptop,
and she will go on. And that is, some of her friends actually don't have cell phones, or they didn't. So they would communicate. That's how they would communicate via social media, private chats and whatever. So that is, she does have that, but it's on a very limited basis. It's not
on a monitored laptop.
Right. It's on a laptop, which, whatever, I can see.
Exactly.
So, but with our middle 2 girls, it was a struggle. I will be honest. I mean, they had their cell phones, they had social media, and I think of all of our kids, they probably got the worst of it as far as, our culture and, what's out there. I mean, it was not pretty. And if I could go back and do things differently, I probably would. But again, I think as parents, we're learning, right? There's no manual for us when we have kids, right? There's nothing that says this is what you do. And then, in whatever year, there's going to be this thing called social media, and this is how you're going to approach it. We're not given that advantage, right? We have to think on our feet as we're going. And you two are doing such a wonderful job because you're giving people that information that they need as things progress in our culture, and they're able to kind of handle it. We really weren't given those kinds of opportunities.
I mean, you think about it when that came out. I mean, from a Catholic perspective, we had books.
That's right.
Or magazines.
And, those are a little bit late to publication. This is instantaneous. We're able to discuss in real time things that happened just a week ago. And that's, we have, technology is a tool. It's not inherently evil or good. It's a tool. And if we use it in the right way, it can become a very, very powerful instrument.
And see, the one thing too, that I keep thinking about teenage girls and social media is that, and it is a tool, and it's a tool that when introduced too early at that developmental stage that adolescents are in, it is exactly the wrong time to introduce that.
That's right.
I've already decided that, when Abby, who is now 14, when she is 18, she goes to college, she can have social media at that point because she will have already gone through so much social development and learned correctly that at that time, she'll be better equipped as a person to, and I bet you anything, she'll probably be like, maybe I don't really need it, because see, we as parents, we didn't grow up with this. And so I think some parents are lured into thinking, well, I'm not really addicted to social media. It's not that big of a deal, blah, 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 whatever. My 14-year-old, 15-year-old, you are at a completely different stage in your brain development, in your social development than your 14 or 15-year-old. They are learning so much that you already know. So it's really important that we cannot see our children the way we see ourselves. They are developing socially. It's such a sensitive time. Yeah. And it's exactly the wrong time to introduce.
Would you, Alicia and Mike, would you agree that I think part of the parents' problem now is that they compare themselves to other parents and they think, well, so-and-so is allowing their kids to have a cell phone, for example, or so-and-so allows their kid to have social. So I guess it's not so bad. I think it's hard, especially as Catholic parents, to have to buck the authority a little bit and to stand up and say, you know what, we're a little different. Yeah. We're going to do this a little differently. And I've said that to my kids, maybe I could be a little bit nicer about it sometimes, but I don't really care what they think, or I don't really care what so-and-so does. That's not how we do it. That's not how we're going to approach this situation. We're going to be a little different, and we're doing it because we love you. And I found myself saying that a lot recently. I'm not doing this, or I'm not saying this, or I'm not taking this privilege away because I'm mean. I'm doing it actually because I love you and I want what's best for you. And I can see this end goal that I have as a parent to raise you to be a faithful Catholic Christian person. And so as a result, I'm sorry, but this is what is going to have to happen. You're not going to have a typical iPhone. You're not going to have this, that, or the other. You're going to get this little Gap phone or True-Me phone because I love you. I've been saying that a lot lately.
Did you get the True-Me phone because you thought it was Merimee? Like, was it a name associated? But I think you're spot on in that both as parents, we're still figuring this out, but we compare. And I remember like looking forward and saying, I want to be like that family. And so, or what have you, because we needed some tether, something to kind of point to, like a good, bold, like, oh, they're doing it. They've got something figured out here. But there's also a very clear sense where we do have to make our own, point of reference, it's in our own family. And that's what makes family life a little bit different than just like, oh, this is going to work for every family.
Or every child, like
right?
You were saying. That's the thing, is they're all so different too.
And we got to grow with it. And I look back and, again, same story as you guys, that it wasn't there at the beginning of our parenting, but it was very much in the middle. And now it's even evolved to a whole new level.
Absolutely, yeah.
And, but even like just, we don't also, for us, we're, God bless those who say their kids can't have any social media, any cell phones. God bless you. We really see it as a tool that they need to learn how to use maturely. And it would be foolish to throw them in the deep end of the pool and say, okay, as a teenager, you can just deal with it on your own. That's foolish. But also for us, at least, it
has to be some training ground.
It has to have some level. And then also from a social standpoint, which is kind of where I want to kind of switch to, is thinking about friends.
Yeah.
But even like for our kids to know, oh, well, there's such an, this event is going on, or there's, all the people are getting together for X. It all is happening on social media. And no one's picking up the phone to call anybody anymore, which I hate, but that's the reality of the world, the water that our kids swim in. And that's where I'm like, well, some level of social media keeps them connected, which is, I guess, kind of back to something you talked about. But I really want to talk about friends, because I feel like in the adolescence, friends get elevated to a whole new level. Their social environment, their development of their identity, all these things that come in, but it's tricky. But friends are so important. So just how did you navigate and how did you help your kids through the friendships in the adolescent times?
Yeah.
Oh, do you want to, so to start with, I think when the ones that were we homeschooled all of them, but when we were exclusively homeschooling the entire group of kids, it was very important for us to be connected. And so we participated in a lot of activities that were with other homeschooling families, and whether it was field trips or what. Now I'm actually in a co-op Catholic schoolhouse. So we actually meet once a week, so we have that social outlet. And it was incumbent upon me and Bill as parents to make sure that our kids had those social opportunities. We also moved over 20 years ago now into a neighborhood that had tons of young children. So it's just been wonderful, because our boys actually are two middle boys anyway. Some of the best friends that they have to this day were their friends that they played with in the neighborhood every day after school. So, our door was this, the doorbell never stopped ringing. The door never stopped swinging open. It was even now, kids, they'll just walk in the house. They know that they're just welcome. And that was always been very, very important to us to nurture, especially those friendships that we saw our kids, naturally gravitating towards, things that they had shared things in common with. For our oldest, it was, a lot of her music friends. We would invite them over because obviously they didn't live in the neighborhood. For our next boys, it was just that open door policy. Anytime, they could just come and hang out, and there was constant sports going on in the front yard, baseball and football. And now it's the same thing, making sure that we're involved in things for the kids and giving them these social opportunities.
Yeah, I think one thing that we have done that we can do better is actually get to know the parents of our kids' friends.
Yeah.
It's something that it requires us to pick up a phone and actually call them, to ask your son or daughter, hey, what's the phone number for Susie's mom?
Right.
Try getting that out of your 15-year-old, right? But that's something we need to do. Yeah. That was something that I remember my parents knew all of my parents' friends.
Yeah.
So I know my parents knew all of my friends' parents. And I think we've lost that these days. And that's one of the things that we have to kind of focus on, because, so much of that negotiation of, who's going there, whatever, it's all handled internally with their cell phones and the social media, that parents are left out of the whole discussion. We don't get a chance to meet the families of the friends of our children. And that can open up our eyes to some problems that we need to avoid.
Right.
And change some ideas about these kids.
It's actually what I have found is, and my kids have been friends with all different kinds of parents, parents who are living in unmarried living situations, parents who are divorced, single parents, sometimes really great parents. And I have to tell you, any times I have reached out to a parent, they're great. They're like, thank you. Thanks for reaching out.
Yeah.
Good to know
you. It's never been an issue. It's never been like awkward or what have you. They're like,
not at all. No. Every parent of a teenager is like grateful, like, oh, good.
We're together on this. Even if we weren't 100% lockstep, they're like, hey, I really appreciate that. Or like we would be, I don't know if we learned
Everybody wants their kids to be safe.
Yeah.
Maybe we don't agree with these parents on every values, but we all want our kids to be safe. We want to know where they are.
Right.
That's all I'm asking.
Yeah.
You know, like,
and I forget who we learned it from, but we do this now where we collect cell phones, right? So kids come over, if there's a sleepover, we collect the cell phones and we tell the parents, you got to text us because well,
when they're younger, not so much with the older teens.
Yeah, not the older teens, but
yeah.
But then somebody else brought that up at one point. They're like, oh yeah, my son always knows that when he comes over, he's like, and we've started doing that too. So he blames you. But it's like, we've got to band together as parents, and support each other because it is hard.
Yeah.
You don't want to be the only one.
Yeah.
But we will if we have to for the sake of our kids.
You know what? If it's okay, I wanted to just switch topics real quick, if that's all right, to because I could talk to you guys forever. But I want to spend at least the last 15, 20 minutes here talking about specifically children with that artistic talent, artistic temperament.
What do you mean there's something different about them?
Yes, I would think. And the reason I want to bring this up is I'll just tell you my own experience, and then I'd like you to kind of tell a little bit about your experience. My family of origin with my brothers and sisters, come from family of 10. And we have in my brothers and sisters, specifically 2 of my brothers and one of my sisters are extremely artistic. I remember my sister Regina saying to me, I cannot not write. She's a writer. She was like, when I have to write, I have to do it, and her whole life, since she was a little girl, I mean, she's only 2 years above me, so really close. That's who she is. They have my 2 other brothers one is a writer and the most amazing musician that I've ever met. He's one of those people who just picks up anything and plays it. He learned the violin for fun when he was 30, he just picks up the ukulele and is like, oh, there you go. And he's playing it like it was nothing, and he's also a writer. I have another brother who's a musician and an amazing visual artist. I think he was in his late 20s and he started drawing, and it's where is this coming from? But they've all had their individual challenges in their upbringing, because my parents are awesome, but neither of them are really artists.
Math teacher and an engineer.
Right. A math teacher and an engineer.
Wow. Yeah.
And I know they were encouraging, but there's something about the temperament of the artist that can be very difficult for parents to kind of understand, why is this child doing this? Why are they like this? So this is more than just getting them art lessons, or getting them music lessons.
Yeah.
And when we spoke, I feel like you're the first parents I've talked to who it seemed to have a actual philosophy about this, because I've seen a lot of artists get crushed, not my siblings, praise God, but I know a lot of other artists who have been crushed by their parents, who've really been wounded, who have mental illness, not because of their parents, but it's just different.
Because they're not understood.
I was just going to say understood.
Yeah, they're not understood. Yeah. So I think we come from we were just talking about this today. We feel like God placed these children with us because we do understand it, right? We're both musicians. We're both professionally trained musicians. I'm a cellist. Bill's a violinist. So we actually met doing our undergraduate degrees doing our performance degrees. So we acutely understand, the music world and what it takes to really excel at something, and your whole life is just enveloped in this art. I mean, this is what we did. This is how we met. This is who we are, even to this day. That's part of our identity, right? So when we were given our oldest child, when she was born, it was very evident from the time she was very young that she was gifted. We had, obviously she's our oldest, so we didn't really know any different, except that we were uniquely prepared to kind of raise this child. And from little things like she knew her alphabet inside and out by the time she was 18 months old. Wow. and was reading by the time she was 3 and 4. I mean, it was quite unbelievable. And the only reason I really knew that this was exceptional was because, you go to the pediatrician and they're telling you the milestones. I'm like, well, she already reached that one a while ago, And so it wasn't, I soon realized that I probably couldn't put her in school. I was going to have to homeschool because she would probably be bored out of her
Right,
skull.
right. She would not be at an age level that other classmates would be. Yeah.
Yeah, no. I mean, that was pretty evident to us very early on. My father was exceptional, very intelligent. And so I remember hearing my mom kind of talk about him, not that she knew him in high school, but that when he was in high school, he actually flunked out of high school because he was so bored. And you know, in reading about giftedness, I recognize now that was just a circumstance that his parents probably didn't understand him and didn't give him what he needed. And so, you know, he just, whatever, he was going and auditing classes at the university instead of going to high school because he was bored at high school. Right. So I recognized that with our kids, and we were just uniquely prepared to give her what she needed. So she started violin at the age of 3 or 4.
She started violin at 4. Now I'm a violinist. And so it was something that was exceptionally personal for me.
Yes.
You know, to be able to share something that's so intimate and such a huge part of you as a father with your daughter, that's like gold.
Yes.
Okay. And so, you know, she and I would practice every day. You know, at the outset, it was, 20 or 30 minutes, just father and daughter time. And it was a very, very beautiful bond that we developed. We used something called the Suzuki method, which I don't know if you're familiar with. It's what I was raised as a child. And it's a very natural way of learning how to play the violin. You treat it as if it's another language. When you're young and you learn a language, you listen to it all the time. You listen to it before you speak it. And in our home, we would be playing classical music 24/7. You would go to sleep and you'd be listening to the pieces that you're working on. So you're listening to the Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, at night when you fall asleep, and 18 other pieces that will be coming down the pike in just a few weeks. And that was a very natural way to learn, and she and I shared that together. And so, over the course of a few years, it was like putting rocket fuel into her, and she just blossomed as a young woman, as a young artist, and as an exceptional musician. She was, at the age of 13 or 14, I can't remember, she was already soloing. She played the Tchaikovsky Violin Concerto with orchestras. Wow. And this is just something that, most violinists, even when they're 25, can't
So
do.
what can I ask you, Bill? So what if there is someone out there who is not a violinist like yourself? Mm-hmm. What advice would you give them? And maybe their daughter isn't as exceptional as yours, but they see this, giftedness in them. What advice would you give for that?
Yeah, and that's why I actually harken back to Suzuki, because Suzuki's philosophy was that the mother, at the time it was the mother and the child, should learn the instrument together.
Interesting.
That they should grow together with it. And this was, kind of revolutionary. I mean, so this was in the early years, the mother would be learning how to play Twinkle Twinkle Little Star with their daughter or their son. And that was geared for,
non-artistic parents. Yeah.
And I think that actually is a real key, is that Suzuki was onto something, that there is, language, music is the language of the soul. And if you can share that with your child, even if you suck, just start learning it with them. And that actual compatriotsness that you would be having with your child, as they grow into this, artist, at least you have that beginning with them. Now they're going to go faster and farther than you, and you may have to drop off at some point, but you've had the beginnings and you have that shared experience. And so that is one of the things that I would recommend, that, I know you can't do it with the drums or whatever you're, but there are a lot of actually artistic pursuits where you can employ that. If your child's learning to draw, learn to draw.
Yeah, do it with your child.
And so that's one thing that I would suggest, is that, if that's applicable, take advantage of it. Now, that's just one aspect of that whole dynamic.
Right. But it does take, it takes a lot more effort to raise a child who is gifted or artistic. There's no way around it. You have to really invest yourself in that child. And it can be exhausting. Just for fun, I was laughing. I said, our children most of them were pretty terrible sleepers. So I gifted, I Googled giftedness and sleep. And sure enough, first thing that pops up is, they don't need as much sleep. I mean, their brains are just constantly moving. I mean, to this day, she's a terrible sleeper. And she has 3 kids. I don't know how she does it, honestly. And I mean, and we had a couple other kids like that too, that, and I think that's part of it is they're wired a little bit differently.
Yeah. What do you mean by they're wired differently? Like, I think that's important to think about, like the artist temperaments, so we've got the skills, the gifting. What is that temperament?
Right.
So I'll start this off. There's kind of a yin and a yang to this, because in order to be a fine artist, there is a very fine level of perfectionism that has to be there. Okay. There's technique that has to be strongly developed, and you only hone that through sheer determination and practice and practice and practice and practice. But then there's that whole sensual aspect of being an artist where you're opening yourself and trying to express yourself. So you've got this, like I said, the yin and the yang. And I'm going to let her talk a little bit more about the yang part of it, all right? Because she's very good at emoting. So go ahead.
Yeah. So Bill's talking about that perfectionism, which I really would like to talk about a little bit more, because it can be a flaw, but it can also be a strength with these kids. But then there's the emotive part, right? You are very vulnerable as an artist, as a musician. I mean, for us, it was having to be on stage, or it is still, having to be on stage. You're giving of yourself to the audience. So it's very vulnerable. And if that's not directed in the right way as a musician or as any kind of artist, then it can get out of hand, because these emotions are spilling out of you, so to speak. And with musicians, especially, there's that sensual aspect of being a musician and really putting your heart and soul into the music. And when it's directed towards God and being offered as something beautiful, you're giving back to him what he's given to you as a gift. That's wonderful. But if it's misplaced or God isn't even in the picture, I think, especially musicians, that sensuality can roll over into promiscuity and things that, I mean, I know that the whole world suffers from that, but I think artists in particular, they might be more prone, because they're so wired so differently, to want to maybe numb some of that sometimes, because it's a lot, as a human being to have to constantly be emoting, or constantly having to be artistic, or having to produce for the world. So maybe they numb it. Maybe it's alcohol, maybe it's drugs. I don't know. But I think that's more of a tendency for kids who are artistic, and because they know they're different, they know it. Yeah. They're not the same as the average kid in the street. So I think there is a tendency for them to maybe want to fit in, but they don't. They are different.
I've thought about that with my kids who are visual artists, that it is very vulnerable for them. Like, my daughter has made pictures and I'm like, you need to sell this. This is amazing. She does not want to, because it's so
personal.
It's so personal, Personal. And my son, I've said to him a million times, I'm like, you need money for something. I see this word burning stuff you're doing. Like, do you know how much someone would pay for this? And it's just so hard for them to even fathom, because exactly what you're saying on a different, in a different, medium. It's like, they're like, I painted this out of my pain, or I painted this out of love for someone, or I painted this thinking of this. It's not about the money for them. You know what I mean? And it's
right.
Yeah, that's,
and
they're not very practical people, are they?
No, but these brooding artists, right? There's this emoting that comes with their, probably in all forms of art, in some way, there's a deeper connection. Would you say that's both in girls and boys, right? That emotion is present?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Something I like to throw in there is that, outside of making love to my wife, the most intimate form of relationship I've ever had is playing chamber music, where I'm in a string quartet with maybe 2 or 3 other people, and you are literally bearing your soul together, forming something that's new, that wasn't there 2 seconds ago. And it really is very similar to the act of, it's an act of creativity. And so it's aligned to that same type of sexual act that we do when we make something new with God in our lives. And I think that's really key, because if you don't if you don't see God as the ultimate creator, and you don't recognize that, and you don't bring him into your life, then that act is almost, I mean, it's extremely intimate, and it can lead to a lot of sexual sin and a lot of intimacy that shouldn't be there. And
a lot of hurt and woundedness.
I haven't really fleshed out the whole thought.
I said a lot of hurt and woundedness. Sorry, continue. Yes.
Yeah, and I just gosh, I should pray about it a little bit more. But the idea of chamber music and
the theology of chamber music here, theology of the body mixed in, and
Yeah.
No, there's a lot to it, and that goes across the spectrum. It doesn't have to be classical music and a string quartet playing Mozart. It could be a grunge band in the back of a garage. When I'm playing this, I'm not praying. I'm focused on creating, right? But the praying needs to come before that. You have to create that centeredness on God first. And if you do that, then he has a way of making it work out.
Yeah. And I think that there's something, again, we talk about this a lot, about developing your kids' giftedness, right? They've all been designed uniquely. And there's obviously, everyone's fearfully and wonderfully made. But when you have a child who has some exceptional talent, some gifting that is there, they were given it for a purpose. And that purpose can be bastardized, that can be, denigrated, or it can be elevated. And in a way, when we put performance above their identity, when we put performance above their ability to give themselves away, when we put a performance above, their relationship with God and seeing how this is gift and that gratitude, how do you take a teenager who is somewhat inherently selfish, right? Inherently,
where they are,
because of the developmental, right? They're developing their sense of self and how they relate to others. There are all of these challenges. And it seems like when you've got somebody who is a beautiful performer, it can, at least from an outside looking in, it can become this very, the spotlight is on me. It's all about my performance. It's all about how I do this or that, or I am so gifted. Like, how do you balance that in this? I don't know if you've seen that or.
Yeah, no, I know what you're saying. We actually, it was interesting because with our oldest, she actually kind of had maybe not necessarily an opposite reaction, but she really suffered from perfectionism, which then kind of rolled over into scrupulosity because she never thought she was good enough, which is fascinating, isn't it? I mean, here was someone who, was actually on the front cover of the Cleveland Plain Dealer, arts and entertainment section as like a quote unquote child prodigy at one point, and then thinks that she's not good enough, she
has a higher standard in her mind.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. It was, that was actually very difficult. We got to the point where we realized this is beyond our scope of even understanding or ability. And we had to seek out a little bit of counseling because we thought we don't know how to handle this. This is
too much to unpack as a parent.
It's a lot. It's a lot to unpack, and that came from that artistic ability, that constant striving for perfection. And again, I know we probably were part of the problem because we recognized her abilities and, pushed, but, again, back to the thing, you can never blame yourself because there's no manual. Sure. We don't know what we're doing. Sure. We're trying our best. But that was our challenge with her. And I think that's just a matter of maybe instilling in your kids the idea of humility, right? Yeah. That the gifts that they are given are from God and are to be given back, and not to be prideful about it. I think actually Bill's really great about that concept of not turning inwards and not, seeking the attention yourself. He's done a great job with helping the kids to be humble. So I think
because that spills over into the attitude towards success on the sports field too, right, true. Mike?
That's what I was thinking. Exactly. Right.
And kind of the same approach that you would take to a very successful football or baseball player in your family. You could use that, for an artistic child in the same sense of like, there is a greater purpose here. You may be the very best on the gridiron, but that's just a small part of who you are, and that God has greater plans for you. And I think that really is, foundational to a kid at that age to realize that, there's, you may be good, but there's something better.
Yeah.
You know, what's funny is that I feel like the kids who are artistic, compared to children who are athletic, I think kids who are artistic are much harder on themselves in the sense that they have, or I should say people, because they have in their minds, this is what it's going to look like. This is what it's going to sound like. And in some ways, we can, and I feel like that's like partially the Holy Spirit, right? It's the Lord. We're giving like this like upper level spiritual experience through the arts. And in some ways, we can never fully express ourselves perfectly, because we're limited. And those kids, when they first come in contact with that, they kind of feel like, it's not good enough. It's not good enough. Like that perfectionism, maybe that's where that comes from. Or even when they're drawing something, like it said, like Da Vinci, one of the reasons he stopped painting and we don't have, because he would like destroy things. He would do it and it was amazing. He'd be like, oh, it's all crap. Just, And then people are like, oh my goodness, like this is so beautiful. But he had in his mind this image. And like, how are you, I guess it's must be just a matter of being gentle, with your children. Because on one hand, you don't want to be like, oh, it's great. And the other hand, you don't want to be like critical. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I think actually just a couple things have just come to my mind as you were talking, but just to go back to, I'll talk about Elena and then a couple of our other kids, but she played for her senior recital, some of the Bach sonatas and partitas. It was actually quite an endeavor. It was incredible. She ended up recording them. And then it's a CD that's actually up on Spotify now. And, but she was very critical at the beginning. There was a couple of things that needed to be edited, just minor things that need to be edited. So it actually didn't get up on Spotify for quite a while because, again, that's a little bit of that perfectionism coming in and her lack of desire even to promote herself. Yeah. She's very, it was actually her brother, Michael, who did it for her and got it up on Spotify for her. And this is what I also wanted to bring up, is another one of our kids who maybe didn't, excel. I mean, he played cello and excelled at a very, very young age, but then got into athletics and that was more important to him, blah, 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 whatever. But his desire to promote truth and goodness and beauty has led him to actually start his own media company called Bonfire Media. And the whole goal of that is to expose people to the good and the true and the beautiful. And so he's promoting his own sister's CD. And then our other son, Paul, wrote a book. He wrote a novel. And that's also up on the website, the Bonfire Media. But again, that's another form of our artist. You're talking about it. You have a sister who's a writer.
And I know Michael's a poet. Michael shared his poetry. Which was like,
and that's up on
amazing. It was so beautiful. Like,
yeah. So that's up on his website on this Bonfire Media as well. But, just incredible to see like our son, Paul, at a very young age, just this voracious reader who loved to write, who's actually now written a book. Like, it's amazing to me. But to be able to nurture that in our children and give them these opportunities so that they can flourish is beautiful to see now as they're adults that, hey, it's borne fruit, that all of this sleepless nights and the lots of, private lessons and all of these things that we tried to do over the years to nurture our children who were artistic and otherwise, that it bears fruit. And it's hard, I think, for those parents out there who have the young children who they recognize maybe are gifted or artistic, that put the time in now, give them what they need, nurture those abilities now because it will bear fruit. And I
would say that it's with artistic children, you nailed it a little bit, Alicia, is that, they're very critical of themselves. And so you have to fight that. You have to always be very, very positive for them. You have to be looking at the good and not the bad, leading with the praise and then giving the criticism. And 80% praise, 20%, critique. And I think really that's because there's such an internal critic in all these children. And that criticism can stymie their artistic ability. If they don't feel that they're good enough or they're not reaching the bar, then it really kind of, that could have long-term negative consequences on their personality and their development. And so that's something to be very careful, is that you have to really, really appreciate the crayon drawings of your 4-year-old as if they were Da Vinci's greatest masterpiece.
Yeah.
And really you have to just continually praise.
Because they need that anyway. Like I was just thinking about, and this is true for all children, right? They need us to kind of get behind their eyes and just really try to get into their hearts and just feel what they're feeling and just meet them there. Meet them there and love them and praise them and encourage them to become whoever it is that God wants them to be.
Because really, at the end of the day, I think that's perfect way to kind of wrap up our conversation. Really, is this idea that as parents, we have to both see something and draw it out. And we have to almost be at least in the early days, the courage for them to continue, because for that ideal of perfectionism or embarrassment or whatever it might be, that it's like, okay, no, you have something here. We've got to bring this out. It's not just for you. Like, I feel like that's what we say to our kids too often. This isn't meant just for you. It's supposed to be shared. It's supposed to be given away, whether it be in performance or, whatever it's supposed to be. Right. But too quickly, our families get caught up in keeping up with the Joneses. And this is kind of connecting it back to even the earlier conversation on just adolescence. It's like, we have to have a long-term view. One of the things we've been saying a lot of is that we need to be families that live for purpose. And when you can think forward, Bill, I think you were saying this, just think, or Tanis, think about what you want your child when they're in their 20s and all those sacrifices that we make along the way. It's worth it. It's worth it for their faith. It's worth it for their moral foundation that they're going to have. It's for the relationships that we have in the home and their maturity, and then their artistic or other giftings that they have, right? But to know those sacrifices are worth it. So it's hard, but it's worth it. And it's so good to see that we're all different, right? Your backgrounds and how you can see it. And I am not artistic. Although I appreciate music and art, I feel like that's been part of my role in the family, is to encourage that with the kids, even though I can't follow along with them as a good counterbalance. That's why we're married. But it's something to just really, it challenges me when I see it, and I want to look at it. And, when I see it, one of my son's, visual, his drawings or what have you, I'm like, I don't understand it. And I don't necessarily see it automatically. And so I have to ask and take that posture of curiosity and say, well, what are you trying to communicate here? Why did you use these colors? Or what does this mean? Or, and even for those who aren't very artistic, there's roles for us to play in joining our kids and getting into their lives. So any final thoughts before we wrap up here today?
I think one thought that I just had at the very end was that, just that how thankful I am as a parent to have been given the opportunity to raise these kids and to be grateful, because no matter the challenges, no matter how difficult it is, I am just humbled and grateful that I have been given these children that I have. And then I'm just, you like Alicia, as a mom, just bursting with pride to see what they've accomplished. And I think, through those difficult moments of raising teenagers and raising artistic children, to hang on, because there's so much beauty ultimately and so much to be thankful for.
Yeah, that is so good. Well, we hope you've enjoyed today's podcast. And if you want to know more about Marriages of Grace, where can they find? Is there information online about Marriages of Grace?
Yeah, absolutely. It's just our website is marriagesofgrace.org.
Okay. All right. Sounds great.
I hope you enjoyed today's podcast. We'll link to both the website and some additional resources. And if you want more information about joining and signing up for Cana 90, you can visit us at messyfamilyproject.org. And until next time, may the Lord bless you and keep you.